Welcome to the Leadership School podcast. I'm your host, leadership and self-care coach, Kyla Kofer. Here at the Leadership School, you'll hear leaders from around the world sharing their stories and expertise on how to lead with balance and integrity. Our goal? Teach you how to be an extraordinary leader. Welcome back, leaders. Well, we have officially wrapped up our college tour series, but I am certain that at some point in the future, we will continue to speak with faculty and staff from colleges and universities around the world in their leadership programs. But today we're switching a little bit and we're speaking with Liu Liu. He is a a global communications coach. And what he does is he trains leaders in how to work with their diverse populations of people all around the world. What does it look like when you are on a project with somebody from another country who thinks differently than you, who sees the world differently than you, who approaches projects differently than you? He has a vast amount of experience in this area and now has taken all of that experience and is coaching us on how practically, what does this look like to work with people, to build relationships with people who are from a completely different world, maybe, than we are, and to be successful in that. So please join me welcoming Liu Liu. Liu Liu, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I've actually really been looking forward to it because you have a great deal of expertise in cross-cultural communications. So I think we're going to talk about today is really, really valuable, especially in a global economy. And I know that when we've had these conversations in the past on the podcast, it's been really, really valuable. And our listeners, the audience is really excited to learn this skill because it's just so needed. And a lot of times, I mentioned just a second ago, we're left kind of trying to just figure things out in this global environment. And sometimes we really make a lot of mistakes or we feel really confused. But what you're doing is helping us to navigate some of those waters with a little bit more confidence and expertise. Am I right?
That's right. That's right.
So maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit and explain a little bit what it is what you do, and then we're going to go from there.
Right. Thank you very much, first of all, to having me on this show. I'm quite delighted to come and share some of my experience, knowledge with the audience and with the listeners. My name is Liu Liu. So many people, you might be guessing, so I am like many of the things you see on the market these days. I'm made in China. I like to say that. So the name Liu Liu, actually, the Chinese name normally have 2 or 3 characters. So the family name is at the front. So, and then the second one is a given name. So, but mine just happened to pronounce the same. The family name and the given name sound the same, but in Chinese they write differently. So the characters write differently.
Oh, yeah. That really makes a lot of sense. I have always been left, and like we're talking about today, feeling a little bit confused, kind of understanding that in Chinese, the family name is first, so the given name is second, but not really knowing how to use them or like, what do you call, what name do you use when I'm addressing you? And I want to make sure that I'm really confident about that as we, have this conversation, but, anybody that I meet in the future.
Yeah, but thank you very much for asking. You see, that's the first important thing you just did in cross-cultural communication is really to take time to find out things you're not fully aware or don't understand. That's very important first step.
Awesome. Well, I'm headed in the right direction. I love this.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your background and experience in cross-cultural communications. You said you were made in China, but you're speaking English fluently, very fluently and clearly. So tell us about that.
Thank you. I started my work career actually in China in a university where we had a language center. So the center is kind of teaching Chinese to international students. So I was the foreign affairs secretary. So hence I do speak English back then. So I studied in school.
That's a big job.
Well, it's a very interesting job because I had the opportunity to work with students coming over to China, to my university. It's called Yunnan University. So another thing you might not be aware is that when people ask me where in China you're from, So I say, if you look at the map of China, it actually looks like a big chicken.
Does it really?
Yeah, the head the head part is like the heading into the North Korea and South Korea. That's where the head is. Then if you go
Okay.
down, the tummy is where the Hong Kong, Shanghai, the more these common names you'll probably hear about. And then Taiwan is kind of Taiwan. There's another island called Hainan Island. Looks like the chicken feet. So, and I always say that I come from the best part of the chicken's bottom. So it's the southwest of the country, which borders with Myanmar and Vietnam. So yeah, that's where I come from.
That's such a great description. I've never pictured China that way. And it's always helpful to learn things in terms of pictures because your brain remembers that better. It really does.
Yeah.
So it's not like China's a small country. There's a lot of things happening in China. So it's helpful to kind of get different perspectives. You know, what's funny is I don't know why I've forgotten this, but until that you said Taiwan, I've forgotten that I've actually been to China. I spent a week in Xiamen, which is just west of Taiwan. So I spent a week, I worked with a program out there. And so it's a fun little connection there.
Yes. So back to the university years,
Yes.
I was working as a foreign affairs secretary, and then we have this language center. So the students coming over from over 100 countries come to study, and then I was I was not teaching, but I was on the management side, managing the process from the enrollment all the way through their time stay there and all the various issues. And that's also where I met my wife, Alison. She came over to study from the UK, and the students also working there for 3 years. And then after that, we moved to Thailand and worked and lived there for a year and then came back to the UK. So that 4 years working in the university laid quite good foundation for me, work cross-culturally.
Sure.
And then you add on to the cross-cultural marriage. So that's another new level experience.
Sure.
And then we moved to the UK. Yes, lived in Thailand. And then the reason we lived in Thailand for a year is because we recognize that for both of us come from a different culture, the best way to establish yourself as a married couple, establish your identity, is not to live in any of your home countries.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, because it's quite an issue. Because if you start your married life in any of the home countries, then you tend to not be able to fully form your own identity as a married couple. So we made that decision, live in Thailand for a year, just to get us established. And then we came to the UK.
Wow, that's really wise.
Yeah. So then that's a real challenge started.
Sure.
So I had a good job in China, in the university. And then when you move to the UK, everything is being pressed to the reset button. Nothing counts. Because as an immigrant, you just have to start from scratch.
So your degree doesn't transfer your education levels?
No, whatever I studied and all that, it's just very clearly been told. I was even being told that actually, it doesn't really count.
Wow.
So, and I took a very programmatic approach. I started in this organization I'm working in now. In the most ground level, I started in the mail room as an immigrant, pushed the mail trolley. For 3 years. But in the meantime, I started doing a degree in international studies, and then later on have a master's in development management. So all those gradually built my career up.
So what you're saying is you have some ambition.
I think it is about believing in yourself, because I believe that I'm educated enough, I'm clever enough to be able to do more, to contribute to society more. So then, yes, and it is really paid off. So I moved gradually along the career ladder, if you like, to managing projects in Asia, and then in South Asia, and then worked in West African region, be their program manager, advisor. And now I have been leading for the past 5 years one of the, we call that corporate priority. Basically, it's the organization's focus area globally. For the past 5-6 years, working with, the organization works with in 50 countries. So I'm dealing with majority of these countries. So yeah,
Wow.
It is quite a journey, but I really enjoy that. And then recently, I think it's people ask me to say, how do you do that? Working cross-culturally quite smoothly, and then made me to sit down and think, actually, there's something I'm been doing right, and I want to benefit more people. So I put it down and kind of worked it out a little coaching program, especially around management issues, so that more people can benefit. So I'm doing both things at the same time. So that's kind of a summary of my journey so far.
Well, it's really amazing. And it says a lot about you that people are coming to you and asking you because they're seeing how successful you've been doing this cross-cultural communications, because in your career, you've worked with people from so many different countries. So, and that's happening more and more, right? We're hiring people from other countries. We have global businesses that are happening. You said your organization operates in how many countries?
50.
50.
Yeah.
That's a lot of countries. And you're having to navigate the employees in those countries, the government, the taxes, all of those things that have to happen in all of those countries. So that's a big task. So what does it look like as you're going into a new country to build a program there? How are you developing and working with the culture and the local people and making sure that you're on the same page? Because trying to manage a project when we're all seeing things from a different angle can be quite challenging. So what does that look like? How do we start navigating those waters?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you start working in a different country, you realize very quickly, actually people operate business quite differently. So I remember in my early years when I was given the responsibility of looking after programs in Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos. And then on my first trip over there, and I was young or younger. And then how do you establish the trust with the so-called local partners? So that is the first challenge. And then the other layer of complication is they are two groups of partners, the local Cambodian organizations, and then you have the expat-led organizations. Mainly they are led by Americans. So yeah, how do you navigate that? You have to approach them very differently, and then to get to connect with them and build trust with them in a very different way. So with the Cambodians, they are very relationship and hierarchical based culture. So then, I took an approach that actually don't make it too formal. So we just, because I come from the head office, if you like, so represents some kind of hierarchical higher position, then that I need to come down to them to make them feel at ease. To say, actually, I'm not coming here to rule you, but I want to come here to work with you. So to put them at ease and then to build relationships, make them to see your human side, if you like, so that they are willing to open up to talk about business with you. Because otherwise, all you get is very superficial interaction, and you can't talk about tangible things.
So taking that time to really build a relationship before the business, like making sure that you're understanding the people that you're working with, and that you're creating that trust. You mentioned that trust, but it's really that relationship and prioritizing that over the business, because the business can't get done unless you have the relationship.
Absolutely. So because then, you need to connect them as a whole person, as a kind of let them see your human side.
Do you have like cultural advisors to that can explain this to you about that particular culture, or are you figuring this out as you go?
Well, I'm figuring it out as I go, but I'm both learning and figuring this out as I go. Because Cambodian, their Southeast Asia culture is very much in line with the kind of Chinese culture, if you like. So I have that background, and then I did some study, and I always do some background research about the country, about their history, and then what are subjects to talk, what are the subjects you shouldn't talk about. And then on the other hand, as I mentioned, you have the American expat-led organization. With them, it's just business. It's business. So you're going there. They want to know on what basis, in terms of a qualification and credential, you are on par and you are given that job. They want to know that. You have to really clearly spell out.
I'm smiling because that makes so much sense. I'm like, of course you would want to know that.
Exactly. So exactly.
But I've never thought about that with me. It's just so natural. Like, that's just what I do. That's just the way I operate. But it's just funny to think, not everybody operates that way. That is unique to my culture. And I don't realize that it's cultural until somebody points it out.
Yeah, because then with the Cambodian organization, I invite them into my hotel. We have a drink of tea, maybe have a meal. Let's just build relationship. With the expats, that organization, you go into the office because that's where you do business. Yeah, you talk about all this. Yeah, it's like interview.
You'll be prepared. You'll have all your documents all ready to go. And
yeah, because it is like interview. Bear in mind, there's another issue, the age dynamics. Because I'm relatively young, like I said, then they want to know, what qualifies you to come to deal with us, basically. So it's entirely different approach. So I have to divide and rule, if you like. And then that works out.
So you're having to manage that mentally too, that mental load too, though, of, okay, when I'm with these people, I need to act this way. When I'm with these people, I need to act this way. And
that's right.
That can be quite challenging because then you never feel like you get to really act like yourself.
I don't think it is an issue of act as yourself. I think it's an issue. It's like I like to, because before I come onto this program, I'm trying to think what would be a good way of putting that to try to help the listeners to understand. It's like you're driving, right? In the UK, we drive on the left side. And then in the US, you drive on the right side. It's about when you change situation, you know which side you're supposed to drive on. Then you don't get crashed or don't get run over. So it is like that. It's not about not being yourself. It's just being recognizing. Actually, if you use kilo as a metric system, you go to the market, ask for kilo of this, and then in the UK you say a pound of that. So it's about when to switch.
So just knowing where you are so that you don't get yourself into trouble or hurt somebody else in the process. That's really important. So, you had some examples when we talked last that made this really powerful. So, when are some examples of when this has not gone well, when someone has not done their cultural research, they've come in and just assumed that things were going to operate in a way that they understood, and why is this causing problems?
Sure, I remember now. I think the example I used is actually it's one of the meeting I said to you. We have a group meeting for the Middle Eastern region, and then also with some experts from team member from the UK side. And then when it's somebody in the region in Jordan, this gentleman's turn to start speaking. And as soon as he started talking about that issue, and then the lady who's organizing the meeting chipped in to said, Miss So-and-so, I just let you know, you only have 10 minutes. And then that gentleman just logged off and never to be seen again, because for him, that's kind of public humiliation. It's like, if you ask me to come to talk in those cultural contexts, time is flexible. You can't just tell me. So I finished when I finish. So, and also that you, as a younger person, younger than me, tell me how I should behave is just deeply offensive. So
when the other person didn't feel like didn't think they were being offensive. They were just trying to get business done, but they weren't
Absolutely.
paying attention to what the other person thought and the way they were approaching the meeting.
Absolutely. For from the UK side, that young lady, she's just thinking, yeah, I'm just trying to manage the time and manage the meeting. So yeah, very easily done. And then you have to spend a lot of time and effort to repair that damage.
So the effort to repair it is going to take a lot longer than if you would have taken that time up front to understand the other person and what they needed in that moment.
Absolutely.
This could be really frustrating, though, for an American or someone with this culture who's coming in and just like all business. It could feel very frustrating to or it does feel like a waste of time, right? It feels like let's just get right into it. I don't want all these pleasantries. But the waste of time is going to happen afterwards when you've so deeply offended somebody that now you can no longer work with that person.
Yeah. I think the so-called waste of time pleasantry is quite important for relationship-based culture because they want to know that they can trust you. They want to know you are somebody that they can deal with as a person, not just business.
You mentioned you're doing your research before going into a new country or a new group. So you're doing cultural research, finding out about the country, the history of that country, the topics to talk about or don't talk about, figuring out how to build those very tangible relationships, actually getting to know people. Like, what kinds of questions are you asking? Are you asking people about their family? Are you asking people about their interests? Are you talking about the weather? I mean, what kind of questions are we asking to really build that trust? Because sometimes trust does have to be built quickly.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is a mixture. I think with relationship-based countries, you can ask questions about ask about their family, and then I think people like to tell you their life story. To ask them about their family, particularly if you meet with a senior member of staff, ask them about their journey. They are quite happy to tell you journey in terms of their life journey. What brought you to this role? All these are quite safe questions, and they are happy to tell you. I think one thing I would try to avoid, I think it's a general rule in any countries, don't talk about political questions. I mean, we had colleagues going out to visit in countries, particularly around maybe election time. They ask people, what do you think about this candidate, that candidate? Because you never know, sitting in the same room, people's opinion can be, they might be supporting different candidates. And don't land yourself into that.
So just avoid that question altogether and don't approach it.
Yeah. And then the other tricky part is actually they will come ask you, so what do you think about this? So that can be equally tricky. So I think I would really be very diplomatic about it.
So how would you respond in that situation? So if we're in a meeting and we've got this political and I say, so tell me, what do you think of Joe Biden? Or, what do you think of Donald Trump? But I'm asking you about our political leaders. And how would you respond in that situation? Are you going to share you said be diplomatic. So are you going to share your actual opinion? So I started this podcast because I wanted to learn and grow in my leadership journey. And I have been so incredibly inspired by the guests and the conversations. And especially recently with this college tour, I've really learned so much. So once the interview ends, I actually keep the conversation going because I have found that sometimes the richest part of the conversation is when we feel like the interview's over and we can just kind of have a relaxed, more casual conversation. Also, if you've noticed, if you've been following this podcast for some time, I used to ask every guest 2 questions. What does integrity mean to them? And what does balance look like to them? Well, I haven't stopped asking those questions. We're just putting those over on our Patreon page. So go check it out at patreon.com/leadership school. And for $6.50 a month, you can support this podcast. It takes a lot to produce every single episode, and honestly, I could use a little bit of support. So anything that you're able to contribute would really mean a lot to me and would able to help me to continue to bring these high caliber guests in to have conversations on what does it look like to be an extraordinary leader and how do we practically do that. So those conversations are continuing over at patreon.com/leadership school, where I'm asking guests some extra questions, some bonus questions, and you'll get some bonus content over there. So be sure to go check it out. Thanks so much for your support. And thanks so much for subscribing, listening, and sharing this podcast. It really does mean a lot. And I'm so honored to show up here in your podcast feed.
So I think in that case, because I'm also trained as a coach, so I would take a coaching approach. So if you ask me that question, I would say, so what is the general opinion about Joe Biden? And then actually, most likely, the person who asked the question will be more than happy to share with me what the general opinion, the public opinion, so on and so forth. Actually, you get yourself out of that.
So kind of flipping that back on them and going, well, what's just a general opinion? And then they let them talk more. When they're talking, you're not having to.
Yeah, because the other day I was on a different podcast, and the host asked me this question, said, what do you think about the recent Harry and Meghan episode? So how do you answer that?
Right?
Yeah. So that's a tricky question. So I just said, well, this is just a kind of a enlarged family affair put into public eyes. I said it's, in any case, every family has their own tricky business, complexity. There's a Chinese saying says, even the best judge couldn't deal with a family affair case.
Wow, that's very diplomatic response. And it's a very compassionate response. Diplomatic, not necessarily. I think it's a very compassionate response, because what you're doing is you're humanizing people. Is you're saying people are people. People exist in families. People exist in relationships. And like, I'm here to understand people and how people work. It's anthropology at its finest.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
So walk us through your program a little bit. When you're coaching people who are wanting to improve their cross-cultural communications and they're wanting to grow, especially at business or just in general, we've got some trips hopefully coming up, if we're traveling internationally, these are important skills to have just for traveling. And I think the more you travel, right, the more this comes naturally to you because you've practiced it.
Yeah. But the thing is then, like you said a little bit early on, I have to be very mindful for myself, learn to switch myself, because having lived in the UK for so long, sometimes I've been told I'm becoming too Anglo-Saxon in my head. So I need to switch when I work with or deal with people from the different cultural groups. So I need to remind myself of that. Yeah, but even within the so-called Anglo-Saxon culture and European culture, there's such a diverse range of approaches when it comes to dealing with issues. In terms of this coaching program I have developed, is what is unique about this is that you can easily go out and buy those Lonely Planet book, the travel book, tells you all the in and outs of the culture to the minute detail. But then you come back, you don't know how to apply. So what I have done is to actually taking those cultural concepts and ideas and overlay it onto the natural program management process. So from the beginning, you get to know the team, get to be introduced to the project, how to set a goal, how to work out a work plan, how to manage finance, time, dealing with conflict within the duration, and how to give feedback. So it's follow that project process, and then how different cultural aspects manifest in those different times, and then to help people, to coach people to be aware. How do you navigate? How do you how can you deal with different aspects of the culture, and then to bring the best out of everybody to work together to deliver results. So that's a unique thing about this program, this coaching program.
As you're walking through in your coaching with people, are you helping them like navigate certain situations, particular situations, or are you just trying to better prepare people so that they can apply these things in situations?
I think it's a both approach because in the coaching sphere, you have so-called pure coaching. So it's purely just working with the client to work with them to self-discover the process, self-discover the solution. So that's very pure coaching. And then you have the moving towards the other side a little bit. You have the mentoring, like consultancy and mentoring. You just give them what they need. So I think my approach is somewhere in the middle. So they need to to go through some process of self-discover, particularly when it comes to their own perceptions, own perspectives, or even bias towards certain culture. So that has to be dealt with and worked with. And then it comes to the other side is, so you can't ask people to to know what they don't know. So that's where all those knowledge points come in. So I will introduce the knowledge to them, but then to trigger their thinking to say, okay, so we were talking about so-called high context culture versus low context culture. This is concept, and how does that show in my day-to-day work? How does that, then once their eyes are opened, it will help them to see actually, wow, the team, the colleague I'm working with, this is why they are doing this way, to help them to open their eyes to see that based on the knowledge. And then we can work with them to say, now you understand why they are doing this. So what will be your strategy? What will be your approach to navigate this?
That's really beautiful because it's also making it easier to be in relationship with people who are different from you.
Absolutely.
Because as humans, we're naturally drawn to people who are similar to us because we understand them and it's less work.
Yeah.
But once we've kind of done some of that work, then to be able to be in relationship with people who are very different and who see the world differently from us, it becomes fun and beautiful instead of something to be afraid of.
That's right.
So I have two questions that are going to kind of go different directions. I'm trying to decide which one to ask first. Let's start with bias, because you said the word bias, and I thought that was really, I think it's a very important word. How do we start to understand our own bias when we're in relationship or just in business, approaching things? Because I think I'm thinking about myself, and that takes a lot of self-reflection and a lot of self-awareness that sometimes I don't have the mental space to notice those things unless someone just points it out to me. And then if someone points it out to me, I'm probably going to feel a little offended. I'm not really like that. What do you mean? But how do we notice our own biases?
That's a very good question. I think there are some principles I can share with you and with our listeners. I remember when we got married with my wife, and somebody gave us, I don't think they gave us a book, but they showed us a book titled "I Married a Barbarian." So I think the title of the book said it all, because we all feel like our own culture is the best and it's the right culture. So there's always a starting point. So when it comes to bias, that says it all. So I think the key thing and the principle is I always say to people, don't compare. Don't compare in the way that to try to figure out which one is better, which one is worse. Compare in the ways how different cultures deal with the same thing differently. So only when you put them onto the equal footing, try to understand the difference rather than trying to grade them, then that's step one to tackle the bias.
So being excited about the differences.
Yeah. I mean, not necessarily excited. You might be getting quite painful when the rubber hit the road, but try to remind yourself it's not one is better than the others. It's just different. And just think at a bigger level to see all those countries, all those civilizations, they have existed the same length of time, not longer, or there must be a reason they are doing something right.
Sure.
Yeah.
I remember someone telling me that they had visited China and they were meeting with a family in China, and the person said, my friend was from the US, and in the Chinese family said that their cooking sauce was older than our country. And
Yeah.
I think that was just a good moment of going, oh, there's a long history here. And there's
But
not with us.
absolutely. But then there's also a strong bias opinion in that comment. That's exactly
Sure.
what I'm saying. That immediately they're trying to establish the hierarchy. So that's not
Yeah.
helpful. So yeah, that comment is very loaded, and immediately can cause offense.
Wow. Yeah. I just didn't even think about it that way.
Yeah. The other thing is that if you show genuine interest and ask people, they will be more than happy to explain to you. Because yeah, how you ask people to explain to you, it's all written on your face, and people can see it. And then if it's genuinely you want to understand, they will be more than happy to explain to you. And then you'll enrich your knowledge.
Like at the beginning of our conversation, like I genuinely wanted to make sure that I was using Chinese names appropriately. Like, and
That's right.
it's genuine curiosity. It's not of, well, you guys are doing it wrong. I mean, there
Yeah.
was none of that coming across, but some that can come across if it, so approaching conversations, global conversations, approaching relationships in general is very much coming to that relationship with a genuine curiosity. So, that helps in marriage. You know, a friend of mine is in a cross-cultural marriage, and she's been asked so many times, well, what's it like being in a cross-cultural marriage? And she always responds, well, I'm pretty sure every marriage is cross-cultural. Because
Yeah.
we do, like, it's two people coming from different lives, different families, and showing
Yeah.
up in a relationship. And I have noticed in my own that I do a lot better when I approach it with curiosity than when I approach it with you're doing this wrong, because then I just end up going into a spiral of resentment, and that doesn't get us anywhere.
Yeah. But having said that, I think there are also certain things are universal principle, like the respect of women, children, elderly, and those are fundamental principle, and they shouldn't be kind of protected by so-called cultural differences. And then that is wrong as well. So that shouldn't be the case. Yeah. Like I remember we went to, I think, one of the West African countries, in Chad, actually. And I was traveling to see the project on the ground. And then my woman colleague come from the UK, they're traveling with us. So when we sort of sat down to have lunch, and then they separated us. And then I discovered actually the custom in that location is actually men eat first, and then women eat whatever is left. So I very politely pointed out, actually, we could eat together at the same time, because it's Muslim culture. So you don't have to sit together, but we can share the food. So it's about gently, making suggestions rather than kind of give them a human rights lecture and the rights of women and children. Yeah. So it's to spot those things, but also, to take it gently. And there are times you have to give up. So yeah, there are times you have to give up because you have to ask yourself, am I here to do the business or am I here to address the human rights issue? So I know that people, some listeners might not agree with me, but it's about choose your battle and understand what is your role in that specific location, time, and space.
Understanding your role, understanding the goal.
Yes.
As well. And also that, like, if you're coming in to make change somewhere, that change doesn't happen quickly anywhere.
No. And yes. And also, if you were to challenge those values at the wrong place, you can end up in big trouble. So I was passing through the passport control one day, coming back in the UK, and the officer is actually a lady, interestingly, sitting there. And then my colleague, when she's from Jamaica, and so she's dark skin, quite pretty. So she went before me and went through. And then the officer asked me, "Do you know her?" I said, "Yes," because I said we are colleagues. She works for me. And then the lady officer said, "Oh, works for you." So that marry her. I said, so I made a joke. I said, well, she's young enough to be my daughter. And plus, I'm married. And then the lady said, it doesn't matter. Just take her. But yeah, you find this situation, what do you do? So if you will challenge her, she won't let you go. So
We'll let you in the country.
exactly. So that's what I mean. Choose your battle. So even if it's hard to swallow, just be aware.
That might not be the moment to really try and change someone's opinion and perspective and cultural
Absolutely.
comments
Absolutely.
and recorrect them and all of those things that there's times and places for those things.
Yeah. And I think also on the business front, the most tricky part any business has to navigate, or the biggest, I would say, the clashing points are time and money management. So particularly relates to deadline and also the management or mismanagement fund. It's the biggest clashing point for Western companies dealing with other parts of the world.
Tell me more about that.
Sure. For example, the time in European concept is called very linear time. It's governed by clock, like our meetings booked for an hour and a half. But in other part of the culture, you have this called a flexible time or even circular time concept. So it means time is something you work with, but you don't govern them. So the typical clashing point is in business meeting, you arrange a time, 9 o'clock, this location, and people don't turn up. What do you do? So you depends on the power relationships, whether you are selling or buying. You can't get angry with them. What do you do? So how do you navigate this situation? That's time management's biggest clashing point. One of the biggest clashing points.
Well, it is really challenging. I've spent a lot of time in Latin America, and we would always say, if they say, oh, the party's at 2:00. And then the next question is that American time or Latin American time? Not American, but is it US time or Latin time?
Yeah.
Because then we know if we need to be there at 2 or if we need to be there at 3.
Yeah. So I heard a similar kind of expression in Africa. One of the African countries said, you have watch, but we have time.
Yes, that sounds about right. So how, if you're coming from somebody who, like my culture, that does operate by a clock and that kind of timeline, how do I not feel so frustrated if I am expecting to have this meeting at 3:00 and nobody shows up, but I'm still wanting to get something accomplished, and that could be really, really challenging for me. But it's also not just on me to understand the culture that I'm in, right? If someone's going to be doing business with me, it's also on them to understand my culture. So how are we working together to kind of understand each other?
Yeah, so absolutely. So, but I think given the time, and also I can't give you all my secrets. I want people to come to work with me. I want people come to work with me, but I also want to touch on the money management issue a bit. The money management issue relates to another set of cultural concepts called shame and guilt culture. So by and large, Anglo-Saxon European culture derived from the Christian belief. So there is a quite clear concept about guilt conscience. So that what is right is right, what is wrong is wrong. So if you mishandle or steal $1, £1 is the same as steal £100, $100, because there's a clear line. You cross it, you cross it. While in the so-called shame culture, a very, very group thinking, it's all about there's no clear boundary. So when it comes to people's misconduct, so it's all to do with whether that misconduct will bring shame to yourself, to your family, or to people around you. So I remember when I was young in China, they would have news say, oh, this and that official has been reprimanded, arrested for corruption and with embezzlement of this and that much money. People's comments always end up to say, that guy has become too greedy. As if only that person is not embezzling too much, then it's okay. So do you hear what I'm saying?
Embezzle just a little bit, that's okay. But you got a little greedy and embezzled too much and got caught.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. And so then when you have the business budget, the account, how do you prevent that? So that is very hard sort of stealing side, but there are some soft side. How do you manage? Say if the company had the function, an event, or it's very often company produce this called visibility products like logoed shirt, logoed t-shirt, pen, whatever, cups and mugs. So this, in some countries, this could end up kind of being disputed to the whole village. What do you do? Rather than being just given to your clients. So what do you do? So all this is big headache. So it's about really understanding why people behave as such. It's not about they are born criminals, because they operate on a very different philosophy.
Wow. Just further complicates the relationship and the doing of business together, making sure that we are very clear about expectations and that we're approaching situations and working together on a project. If you're all working on a project and we're approaching it from all these different angles, trying to make sure that we're all really on the same page and we're in agreement of how we're going to go forward.
Yeah.
It can be a big task, just as big as the project itself.
Yeah. Another thing when it comes to business is what's that called? Tendering process, right? So it's quite common practice. You want to purchase, you need to have a few tendering to compare the price. Again, that can be quite easily flawed in many countries. So it's like they'll come up with 3 quotes, but probably legitimate businesses, but they're all family members. So again, what do you do? So you need to really understand how that culture operates. Then you know what you're dealing with and try to skillfully navigate through, but not to always take a confrontational approach, because that gets nobody nowhere. So you want to solve the problem, like I say, but you want to understand your place. Your place is about your business. How do you navigate your business through those tricky situations? Mm-hmm. Because otherwise you end up confronting people all the time.
Sure. And then that just takes your business, right?
Yeah.
You're more focused on the confrontation than on the achieving a common goal.
Absolutely.
Wow. So I want to wrap us up here, but I have one last question. I'm just curious if there's anything, or if you had one piece of advice that you would want to give anybody who's approaching a global job or a cross-cultural communication with at work or just in a relationship, on a maybe everyday basis. But really, we want to talk about leadership roles here. So if you're in a leadership role, one piece of advice that you would want to make sure that you pass along.
Yes, come to join me on my program. But on the serious side, looking at the leadership program or management program, right? Or we are now talking about our listeners are managers, leaders, or to be leaders, managers. If you look very carefully, this is the journey I've been through as well. It's like along the way, you will be given loads of trainings relating to the management issue, your financial management, team management, conflict management, you name it, you get it. But none of the companies so far I know of have kind of systematically give people this cross-cultural management training, cross-cultural intelligence training, given the fact we are now operating such a global scale, and people just, in a way, kind of, it's not in denial, but people doesn't recognize actually they sleepwalk into this situation. We all speak English, maybe, but we're not speaking the same language. So I think it's really my one piece of advice is that whether with me or with other people, you really need to wake up to the fact we are operating in a global context, but very culturally diverse context as well.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, how can we find you if we do want to work with you and really grow in our cross-cultural communication experience and knowledge?
Sure. You can check my website, liuliucoaching.com. And also you can find me on LinkedIn and send a message and we can talk about it.
Excellent. We'll have all of those links available in the show notes if somebody would like to work with you. Well, this has been really interesting, and I'm just really grateful. This is such an important conversation, especially as, the internet comes and we are now all working remotely, and we're working literally all over the world. People are traveling all over the world and working for companies somewhere else. And it's really important to focus and to start learning how to build those relationships, because relationships matter. They really do. And if you don't have the intent, if you're not intentional about building relationships in a cultural context, then you're kind of missing out, because it's really beautiful to know people from other cultures and other countries. And not only are you missing out, but you're also possibly creating some more challenging experiences for you later on of having to go back and correct things, and spend that time on the other side of it, when really, if you did that work up front, you would be able to operate much more efficiently and effectively and have new friends in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. As a leader and manager, you're already given the responsibility of delivering the results. And then on top of that, if you don't know how to navigate these cultural issues, then there's added pressure. Then, it's really, I see people get so much into trouble, they're not able to deliver results, and then they end up doubting themselves. Actually, it's not worth it. So it's better to do the homework beforehand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Liu Liu. It's so nice to meet you and talk with you. I really appreciate you joining me for this amazing episode, and I look forward to seeing what you're doing in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening, listeners. And I hope what you hear can help you one way or another. And I look forward to work with some of you in future to go deeper into the issues we touched today.
Yes, please do. Please do. Awesome. Thank you. Hey, thank you so much for listening. If you've liked what you heard and you want some more tools and resources to help you on your journey, go check out kylakofer.com/free stuff.